Hello everyone, you are on the channel Scary Story. Tonight I'm going to tell you a story about something that happened to my uncle when he was a young man, living alone in a small, isolated cabin. He was a writer, and he'd moved out there for the peace and quiet. He got it, maybe a little too much of it. The nearest neighbor was miles away, and the only sound at night was the wind whispering through the pines. It was the kind of deep, dark quiet that could either soothe your soul or make you jump at every creak of the floorboards. One evening, deep in the throes of a winter storm, he was huddled by the fireplace, a half-written manuscript on his lap. The wind was howling outside, throwing handfuls of snow against the windows like tiny, angry fists. Suddenly, over the roar of the storm, he heard it. A knock. Not a frantic, desperate banging, but a slow, deliberate knock. 3 times. Knock, knock, knock. His heart leaped into his throat. Who could possibly be out in this weather? He wasn't expecting anyone, and the road to his cabin was treacherous even on a clear day. He tried to ignore it, telling himself it was just the wind, a branch hitting the door, anything. But then it came again, louder this time, more insistent. Knock, knock, knock. It sounded solid, real. Someone was out there. Hesitantly, he put his work aside and walked to the door. He peered through the small peephole, but all he could see was a swirling vortex of white snow. There was no shape, no figure, just the blizzard. He called out, "Who's there?" His voice sounded small against the storm's fury. For a moment there was no reply. He was about to turn away, convinced his mind was playing tricks on him, when a voice answered. It was a man's voice, surprisingly calm and clear despite the wind. "I'm lost," the voice said. "My car broke down a ways back. Could I possibly come in and warm up for a bit, just until the storm lets up?" My uncle was a kind man, but he was also cautious. Living alone in the middle of nowhere teaches you that. Still, the thought of leaving someone out in that blizzard was unbearable. "All right," he called back. "Just a minute." He unlatched the deadbolt, the metal cold under his fingers, and pulled the heavy wooden door inward. A blast of icy wind and snow rushed into the cabin, extinguishing 2 of the candles on his mantel, and standing on his porch was a man. He was tall and thin, dressed in clothes that were shockingly inadequate for the weather. He wore a simple dark suit, the kind you might see on a businessman, but it was completely dry. Not a single snowflake clung to the fabric, not a drop of moisture. His shoes were polished dress shoes, also mysteriously clean and dry. He wasn't even shivering. He just stood there, a faint, polite smile on his face. "Thank you," he said, his voice as calm as it was outside. "You're very kind." My uncle, stunned by the man's appearance, could only nod and step aside to let him in. The man walked past him, bringing a strange stillness with him. The wind seemed to die down the moment he crossed the threshold. He stood in the middle of the small living room, looking around with an unnerving curiosity. "A lovely place," he commented. "Very quiet. Can I get you something?" my uncle offered, his voice trembling slightly. "A hot coffee? Some tea?" The man turned to face him, his eyes dark and empty. It was the first time my uncle really looked at his face. He was pale, unnaturally so, and his features were sharp, almost too perfect. "No, thank you," the stranger replied. "I won't be staying long. I just need to wait." He didn't move towards the fire. He didn't take off his coat. He simply stood there, a silent statue in the center of the room. My uncle, feeling an unease that was colder than the storm outside, tried to make small talk. "So, where did your car break down?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The man's smile widened slightly, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Oh, just down the road," he said vaguely, gesturing with a long, pale hand. "It's not important. It will be taken care of." An hour passed, then 2. The storm raged on, but inside the cabin there was only a tense, heavy silence, broken by the crackling of the fire. The stranger didn't move a muscle. He just stood there, watching. He wasn't watching the fire, or the books on the shelf, or the storm outside the window. He was watching my uncle. His gaze was constant, unblinking. It felt like he was looking right through him, seeing every thought, every fear. My uncle tried to go back to his writing, but he couldn't concentrate. The man's presence was overwhelming, a suffocating weight in the small cabin. Every time he glanced up, those dark, empty eyes were on him. He started to feel a creeping dread, a primal fear that had nothing to do with being alone. It was the man. There was something profoundly wrong with him. Finally, my uncle couldn't take it anymore. He stood up, his chair scraping loudly on the wooden floor. "Look," he said, trying to sound brave, "the storm doesn't seem to be letting up. Maybe I should try and call for a tow truck for you." The stranger's smile never wavered. "That won't be necessary," he said smoothly. "My ride will be here soon." Just as he said those words, the knocking came again. 3 slow, deliberate knocks on the door, just like before. But this time, it didn't startle my uncle. It terrified him. The stranger turned his head slowly towards the door. "Ah," he said, "that would be for me." He walked to the door, his steps completely silent on the floorboards. He didn't even look at my uncle as he passed. He simply opened the door. My uncle braced himself for another blast of wind and snow, but none came. The air outside was perfectly still. The storm had stopped. And standing on the porch was not a tow truck driver or a concerned neighbor. It was a figure, tall and draped in shadows, impossible to see clearly. But my uncle could feel a coldness emanating from it, a cold far worse than any winter storm. The visitor stepped out onto the porch to join the figure. He turned back one last time, his face half hidden in the darkness. "Thank you for your hospitality," he said, and the polite, empty smile was still on his face. "It's always nice when they let you in." Then he and the shadowy figure turned and walked away. Not towards the road, but directly into the dark, dense woods behind the cabin. They didn't crunch in the snow. They made no sound at all. They just dissolved into the darkness. My uncle slammed the door shut, locking every bolt he had. He didn't sleep that night. He sat by the fire with a poker in his hand, watching the door until the sun came up. The next morning, the world was blanketed in a thick layer of fresh snow. It was pristine, untouched. He cautiously opened his door and looked out. There were no footprints leading to his cabin, no footprints leading away from it. There was no sign that anyone had been there at all. There was no broken down car on the road. It was as if the strange visitor had been a figment of his imagination, a ghost conjured by the storm and the solitude. But my uncle knew he was real. And he never forgot the man's final words. "It's always nice when they let you in." He never found out who or what he invited into his home that night. He sold the cabin a month later and moved back to the city. He says that sometimes, on quiet nights, he can still feel that cold, unblinking gaze on him. He says that some visitors, once invited in, never truly leave. Thanks for listening to this story on Scary Story. If you have a strange encounter you'd like to share, let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more chilling tales. Stay safe and always be careful who you open the door to.